Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 8.52. Alright, well, let's continue this. We're almost ready to enter 1939, the year the war will most likely start. Okay, transport ship engines. And okay, well, mainly the holes we're waiting on. So I would like to be able to do invasions. I have 2 landing craft types. Units now, and mentioning that, I was moving him down to here. Detach him from that. I'm going to build this ship. We're going to combine the 2 sets. The 2 temporarily, we're going to rebase there to transport him. Auchinleck. The battle commander down there now. Okay. I have taken. So every time I say it's just King, like it's a person's name, King. Your Majesty. Come on, people, get that right. We're gonna do it. If we're theoretically addressing the King, call it Your Majesty. Very good. And also bad. He absolutely is good, of course, but bad about it is more units to upgrade. Obviously, just about everything again, I talk about Germany a lot, but I keep everything upgraded except for like the SA that I specifically don't want to do. So this is an odd feeling for me. Now I'm hoping that once we can change their policies, or as they call them, laws, we'll get a significant boost of ICs, and we can convert more over and quickly get them up there. And yes, I'm really hoping to have the 41 before the East really explodes. And yes, I was talking on the last episode about the historical path and what we've seen in some of the World War Wednesdays with the game sort of going off the rails. It does allow us to, as players, to predict, sometime around December 41, Japan's gonna, explode out into the Pacific, so we don't have to garrison anything over here significantly then, and we can just leave it undefended. Yes. And yes, that in theory, if we were to change the facts on the ground, meaning no garrison, Japan could just walk in. But whether the AI will know it, or whether the humans programming what they would allow the AI, when they would allow AI to do something, is that if Britain and France are at peace, and if they've withdrawn everything but the most minimal police from their territories here in Japan were to invade, they just come over with a big sledgehammer and hit them on the head with it. It's only because France is fully defeated and they've been able to occupy Indochina. And in 41, you had Britain on the ropes in here. They're looking like they may be losing in North Africa. And Japan totally misread America's abilities. as well as their then well, yeah, Japan isn't doing so good here, and their willingness to fight because they saw the America First. Oh yes, mentioning that, Mr. Trump, he likes to be called Mr. Trump, so we'll call him Mr. Trump, is now on the America First bandwagon. He likes he's coining the term America First, America First. Of course, you go look up America First, and that's the group that Charles Lindbergh was involved in. I've talked about it before. And they were the anti-war, stay out of war at all costs people that were, well, the Nazis weren't, so bad, but, definitely don't ever get involved in a European war again. And now he's taking up the America First platform. We're going to have a super strong military where he's going to be the best military in the world. Military best person ever. But we're going to stay out of all wars and we're going to put America first. And who cares about the rest of the world? Man, this guy doesn't know anything about history. This guy doesn't understand anything. And yes, I'm sure there's a few Trump supporters here that may decide to go bye-bye from this series. But God, how misinformed can you be? Now, maybe they just presume that all Americans are idiots, or just Trump supporters are idiots. And normally I don't say that about Trump supporters. I just think they're angry people that are looking for something that will work. But if they presume that you can resurrect the old problems and go, oh yeah, we're now America First again, and have nobody realize that that's the anti-war, that's the Cindy Sheehans of the past that were collaborationists more than they were confrontationalists, that you're going to resurrect them and no one's going to notice and everyone's still going to follow you? Do you really think that lowly of your supporters? And so his America First platform. Yeah, okay. You go, oh, well, but he wants to, that really just means that he wants to put America before the rest of the world. Okay, yeah. So do all the other Republican people, and even so does Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders, not so sure about it, and Obama, not so sure about it. I think Obama wants to correct all the problems in the world and thinks that America's more than half to blame for them. So I'll give you that Obama loves America, except for that he wants to change everything about it, America. So that means he doesn't really love America. He doesn't hate our country. He just wants to change our country into something unrecognizable to most of us. So that means he really doesn't like our country the way it is. And you go, oh, well, there's racism. Yeah, I've talked about that before, and that's not just what he's talking about and just what he's doing. Yes, I totally understand that black people in America feel put upon, maybe would be a good term, feel overly scrutinized at times, when they go into stores or whatever. And that's partially people making standardized judgments, but that's also partially because a lot of crime is done by some black people, not by all black people, but by some black people, and because of the sort of what I like to rap culture or thug culture, and that is that the people who are the real sort of gangsters and the people and a bunch of other people just dress like the gangsters, but they're not gangsters because that's just the style. And so people not in that culture can't define who is, a guy wearing jeans and a white t-shirt that's untucked, is he a gang member or just dressed that way? I don't know. They may know because of certain tattoos or something like that, but we can't always read that, how people are dressed and make these judgments as to things, because I know there's a lot of really good black people out there, and I don't know how many of them play or watch this series, and I hope many of you do. And I don't have negative opinions about black people in general. It's that, and I've live in Greater LA. There are, and I went to school with them. There are thugs and gangsters that are black. There's also, now my areas were more Mexican gangsters and in the gangs, and I knew some of. I knew some of them, and at least one of them got out. But this is not talking from some white person who, oh yeah. When I was at high school, I didn't know him at high school, so this isn't, oh, I know him. A friend of mine was on the baseball, a good friend of mine was on the baseball team with him in high school when he was briefly on the baseball team. That was Snoop Dogg. Okay, I went to the same high school at the same time as Snoop Dogg. And now you can maybe pin me down a little bit more if you want to who I am, but I was at the same high school, the same thug-oriented high school that Snoop Dogg was rapping about in his younger days. So now you can get, again, how old I am. I'm basically, within a few years, the same age as him. Like I say, I never consciously met him. Okay? But I was at the same high school as him. I could go into more details, but I won't. But I went through that school. So I know, the culture and the people. And because I know it, I know that they're not all of that. They're not all that. They're a great mix of people, of either Hispanics or black people. I'm not one of these people that are either isolated, live in Maine and hardly know any black people, or, which I understand, I'm not part of the East Coast culture, but I understand it's much more neighborhoody oriented than on our West Coast culture. America is different in different regions. And so, it's different. So I know some of these people. But when you dress the same, and then you have people in the stores and store security, how do they define? It's not so much black people they're worried about, it's people dressed in a certain way, and some of them happen to be black. That is it. So like I say, I know black people feel put upon. I know they feel singled out, and they believe, and maybe it often is singled out, is because of their race. Now that doesn't mean that somebody who, even they may be a black person who's the store security, it's just, and that they hate or dislike black people. This isn't the old racism, at least in where I live, the old racism from the South. This is more of a grouping of people together. And so I get Obama's idea of wanting to equalize the playing field. The way he wants to go about it, I don't, but I get that. That is different than wanting to fundamentally change America, which he does, and he also loves it. I know that's how he got there. I've explained myself. I'm not a person coming at this from a complete ignorance. I'm also not trying to make broad brush judgments against everybody. But that's what we're looking at. So some of these things that America first. Well, yes, Hillary is a Democrat. Hillary is corrupt. But Hillary is an American first. I do firmly believe that. Bernie Sanders and his socialism, I know I'm talking to modern politics and this is World War II, but I just don't buy that he's just this sort of, I only want to sort of kind of redistribute a little bit of wealth. That's all he can admit to. So, America first, and you're using it in the context of anything in America, it's looking back to this very period, 1939, because it was starting up over, and this is even before the war, and I don't know exactly when America First organization was first formed, but Charles Lindbergh had multiple times traveled to Germany, had good things to say about the National Socialists. Again, I don't think he was looking, I don't know Charles Lindbergh's views on Jews, but, and he may have been an anti-Semite, I quite honestly, I don't know right offhand, and I'm not trying to say that he was, but I don't think that was a major concern of his. He was seeing that Germany was being well run. It's like I talked about some of the British leaders coming over, seeing that Germany was being well run when France was in chaos and the Soviets were doing their wacky stuff. Spain was in civil war. So, yes. And they were seeing war almost really, and you can look at some of the headlines. Again, if you've seen some of the stuff that was going on with TRE all over Czechoslovakia, they were afraid, and the America First types, and those were both the organizers of it, as well as the general people who, were traumatized and don't want to be in another war. I get that too. That Europe is about ready to go to war. Let's keep America out of it this time. So this is growing America First. And so again, I was trying to stop this rant, but I can't. When you see Trump, now I think part of it is his negotiating tactics, but I also think it's, and I think because Trump is, the art of the deal, and he knows it, you don't hold positions in negotiations that you're unwilling to stand by. Meaning, you put out something and they say no, and then you may adjust it back and forth, but eventually you go to a point going and say, hey, you either do this, it's got to be this way, or the deal's off. And if you go to that place and then they don't give at least significantly towards your position, I mean, they might not give 100%, but at least they're mostly towards your position, you've got to be willing to walk away, because otherwise you will get a reputation of caving in too much. He realizes this. So if he puts a bunch of demands on NATO, and either NATO can't or won't meet them, and he walks away, and his America First, don't get America involved in war, will signal bye-bye to Ukraine. Do you doubt me? Do you people in Ukraine, there's a few viewers, we can talk about viewers of this channel sometime, but I know I definitely have like significant viewers in Poland, Finland, and Sweden, and which these countries I just mentioned should be concerned if Ukraine goes bye-bye. What's next? Where next? And so if he's threatening to pull out of NATO, and NATO won't or can't meet his demands, and he's willing to deal with, because he doesn't either see the strategic interests or what, I don't know, if he's on this America First doctrine, bye-bye to the Ukraine. And then the question comes in is, will the people that are confronting America, whether they be the Russians or somebody else, will they know where the line is and how far they can push without getting into a major war? Because God, I want to, if it was just saying bye-bye to the Ukraine and then everything would be fine and we weren't going to have World War II, I'm sorry, Ukraine, I would have to say as an American, bye-bye to it. If that was, but that was what they said about Czechoslovakia. But because I don't believe the Ukraine is where the limits are, and then they'll decide to get the Baltic states, and then they'll decide to get and it won't stop. That is, and this goes for, potentially any of you viewers out here, my views on Eastern Europe or Western Europe is not that I want to go to war over your country and the invasion of the Soviets. And yeah, okay, since Latvia has a nice big letters here, let's just say next week there's a supposed massacre of Latvian citizens, or of Russians living in Latvia, and then a week later there's a Russian invasion of Latvia. And knowing that that is just a stepping stone onto it, am I proposing that the U.S. go to war and start nuking Russia? No, absolutely not. Am I suggesting that the U.S. just starts sinking Russian ships, cargo ships, wherever they see them, with our submarines? No, I am not. But what I am suggesting is that instead of letting that happen, is to put in maybe a brigade of Americans, or maybe a mixed brigade of Western Europeans and Americans into Latvia to sit here, train, be part of a defensive NATO agreement here, and then if we start getting any funny stuff and they start shooting at, the what I understand they're being called the green men, meaning Russians without any unit identification, claiming to be locals that are intervening in the country, start shooting at them, absolutely yes. And then yes, if the Soviets start, if the Russians start driving tanks across the Latvian border in there, yes, the American units there should shoot back at them. Because if you're clear about your policies, and if you are put in something like a brigade, then the Russians won't go in there, because they won't know where the fallout will end. Will it just be this one U.S. brigade versus a Russian division? And if the Americans kick the Russian division's ass, of course we're going to have a lot of diplomatic and publicity going all over this thing. But is that going to be the extent of it? Probably. If, say, the Russians were to invade, the theoretical American brigade defends itself well, but all the rest of Latvia were to collapse and be occupied, and then the Russians were to allow, they could crush, enough divisions of Russians, well equipped. I'm thinking a brigade with some Abrams tanks. If they were, enough of them, they would be able to crush them. But if they were to just, say, surround them and take out the Latvians and go, hey, we'll let you, debark, either march into Lithuania or get on board ships and leave, would that calm the thing down and not go to general war? Probably. That kind of stuff would probably happen. That is what I'm willing to put on the line over a place like Latvia, because Latvia, to the best of my knowledge, is not a out-of-control country, meaning they don't have some dictator who's going to start marching ethnic Russians into gas chambers or something, and then obviously well before that stage the U.S. should withdraw all support from a country like Latvia. Now they might decide we've got to remove ethnic Russians because there's problems or something, and remove them by sending them back to Russia, or something like that, which I'm not in favor of, but I could probably deal with well enough and keep them as my general ally. So, so long as they're behaving well, they're whatever, then yes, because Latvia would just simply be a stepping stone to greater problems. So this is part of the lessons that we're looking at here when we were looking at Romania or Poland. Britain put it on the line for Poland because it had originally sort of done so with Czechoslovakia and then let them fall apart, and realized once they took Czechoslovakia entirely, not just the Sudetenland, that Germany wasn't going to stop. Was Poland the right choice? I don't know. Obviously, in hindsight, in the sense that Britain won, yes, it was the right choice. Would the choice better have been Czechoslovakia? In the sense that, would they have still won and, say, maybe had less bombing deaths of civilians in Britain, and maybe not have France fall to Germany? Probably. That probably would have been a better choice. So would it have, once Czechoslovakia was gone, would it have been better to let Poland go and arm yourselves up better so that the RAF was 3 or 4 times better to defend its airspace from German bombers, so all those civilian deaths in Britain wouldn't have happened? And yeah, by that time, Germany would have conquered France. But delay the war by 2 years, but still have the ultimate same outcome with less death. Maybe, I don't know. So these we don't know, but they're sort of choices. Okay, 4-engine bomb bays have advanced, which helps primarily because we got building here. We're not building the big heavy bombers, but the flying boats and the nav air is helped by that. And not that I don't want to build strategic bombers to bomb Britain, I just don't think we have the IC focus to focus on that well enough. And what I really love about, because before I ever found Hearts of Iron 3, and before there was ever a Hearts of Iron 1 and many of the things, I've really been designing in my head a computer war game, not programming, designing, but how I'd have it work out, to have a game that you could explore realistic alternatives, like Britain, France, and Czechoslovakia going to war with Germany. What would happen, And whether you have humans, and obviously countries or humans or whatever make mistakes at times, so play it once doesn't give your ultimate outcome, but just how long would Czechoslovakia last? And then if you had started to push into Germany, at that, how well would that have worked out? Those kind of things fascinate me. And that is one of the reasons I want to play this game, is to be able to war game them out. Now we do, okay, yes, we need to do our beginning of the year element. Okay, annual espionage. Well, we're doing better with that, but we're going to keep that up. We're going to keep doing political spying. I think we have another one of these available. Yeah, we want the agricultural industry. And then I may go back to short-term economic boosts. So let's do this. Okay, well, let's see. We've been doing the Air Force and the Navy some, so build new factories. Okay, so well, that's pretty good. Armaments, 3 armaments factories, 2 tank, 2 aircraft, and 1 shipyard. That will help with a lot of things. Yep, we're going to do that because we're still helping with the naval and air, but it will help us with our preparing our ground forces for the coming war. Okay, long-term investment still, and national recruiting policy. Again, we're going to go with balanced. Maybe it's just my personal preference. That's what we're going to go with. Okay, well, that's looking pretty good for what limited we have here. And all the way down on that. Okay, fighter ground control advance. We're going to keep doing that because that's going to help our Battle of Britain, I believe, considerably. Okay, yes, there we go. What we were hoping for farm mechanization. Every farmer needs a tractor. Sure does, and that's going to get the hell out of our money and supplies, but yep. Hopefully that will help us out long term. Manpower. Naval bomber prototype. Good. Let's improve these. Okay. They still have a very light force on against Poland and a massive one against France. We'll see how this goes. This will be interesting. I'm seeing here, obviously, they have not shifted forces over, and I don't know if this is the usual AI thing or not, for not figuring out how to do that. This is probably enough to keep them from rampaging across Germany, but it doesn't look like it's going to be enough to move in and crush Poland. And the Republicans are still slowly dying. Oh, should have had these guys walk into it sometime now. Okay, well, maybe they're holding this line back here. I'm going to temporarily move them back here. Now let's just move them back to Mercenaries. But I don't want them to see them as, and so I want them to be as unprepared as possible for when we go to war with them. Float planes. Okay, good. Now I hope most of you understand that capital ship, particularly battleships, but the major capital ships, guns had the range to shoot over the horizon. Meaning they could not see, even now the Japanese had some of the larger what they call we called them pagoda towers, which are actually I think a bit more Chinese, but really sort of high, huge towers built on their ships that were fairly large. Made Japanese ships sort of distinctive from long range, but that, you know, to see as far as they can. But the heavy guns could shoot further than you can see because, of course, the curvature of the Earth. Let's swim. Infantry unit training. Sounds like a plan. That the guns had greater range that was accurate in that they could, you know, within a certain degree, reliably hit a designated spot. So, and as they moved even more so from coal to oil, burning on their ships, it became harder and harder to spot the enemy ships. And even when you could see the enemy targets and you fired at them, and you know, like with your 10-inch guns or whatever, 12-inch, or depends on the nation and whatnot, fire the guns and you see the splashes come up, and you could quite a long range. Are they 200 yards short or are they 400 yards short? You couldn't necessarily tell at this time. You know, you're looking through rather good optics. You know, they had pretty good capabilities in that way. So that's what the float planes. One of the missions for the float planes is to get up fairly high, out of anti-air. You know, and earlier on, you know, anti-aircraft continued to improve as time went on, because obviously as you got more air attacks, armor cars, more air attacks, they improved the anti-aircraft capabilities. But just try to stay out of enemy range there, and then observe the fall of the shot and report back, you know, that you're 200 yards short or you're 200 yards long, so that may be a little more observable in that the splashes on the far side of the ship, but as well as seeing over the horizon as well in targeting. Not that you're going to be able to hit them because you're moving, they're moving, even though you're a fairly stable gun platform. You're at least being able to engage them. Now, of course, the other thing, and what the Germans used a lot of their float planes for, with their ships, was simply to spot targets, because they were doing, you know, spot enemy ships or enemy convoys or enemy individual transport ships, to go and hunt them down. And so they also used them simply to find the enemy fleets, but they were an ongoing role. Okay, we've got armored HQs. Good. Well, let's go with Marine HQs. Those may be useful. And gun position twin-engine airplanes. Okay, well, let's do accountability. No, let's not. Let's do turrets. We're in 39. We'll do that. Okay, what are we back to? Oh, yes, okay, good. Good, now the ship's available, and 4-engine bomber group. Yeah. Well, some of the more critical ones first. Yeah. Let's see, we got going. I want to build a second. Armor division. Let's do that. Let's make sure they have some new tank guns, because we want them to effectively deal with German panzers. Let's do this relatively cheap. The heavy AA, I don't believe are as good early on as truck transport and headquarters. Oh, no, that's too many. Okay, Guess we're gonna lose the anti-tank. We need that. A heavy anti-aircraft. Let's take a quick look. The dual purpose thing here. We are members of the Allies, and the year needs to be at least 44. And this is one thing that I didn't know until I looked into, well, I didn't know a lot of things until I looked into it, but recently I didn't know until I had looked into it some. The British, the American, and the Soviet heavy anti-aircraft guns, 75 millimeter type and larger, weren't really as dual purpose as I thought they were. They weren't anything like the Germans. Basically, they were fine if you pointed them up in the air and fired them in that direction. If you pointed them horizontal and fired them along the ground, they would break. Not the first shot necessarily, but they just didn't have the ability to deal with the recoil in a more or less horizontal position. You could easily point them at a tank and shoot, but repeated use, and I don't know whether that was 5 shots or 30 shots or 100 shots, I don't know, and it may have varied in different nations were doing it, but they just really weren't built as dual purpose guns that the Flak 18 or the the 88 millimeter flak guns the Germans were already doing as dual purpose guns. So that sort of surprised me. Now that's something that is, if you put your mind to it, and it really to a point is obviously hit the research tech button, is something that can be fixed, because it's not like trying to discover new principles of recoil. They all knew it. They were building anti-tank guns. They just didn't build their anti-aircraft guns right, and so it would have been done better. Okay, Netherlands. Yes, you may have 2 Bristol Blenheim units built. So, and I found that was sort of surprising that the US and the British didn't work that out as early as I thought they would have. Strange little things you learn. Especially with, one, the American sort of, well, obsession of trying to, do everything. And Britain with its experience in, 40 through 41, that they would have talking to camouflage designs. That they would have seen how well it was working out for the Germans and followed that policy. I would have thought it would have been a no-brainer to try to redesign there. Because all it is it's this shearing, it's the action. You push the recoil straight down into the ground, the way it was, or more or less down. It was designed, but if it's horizontal, mounting it would, shear. And so you had to redesign part of it, and yeah, it would take a different production, but you'd still be able to use the all the same basic. Most of the guns would be the same, use the same ammunition, so it wouldn't have had to be. Now, obviously, you'd make a anti-tank variant of the ammo, but it wouldn't be putting a whole different gun operation into field production or something like that. So I would have thought it would have been a no-brainer. Nav tactics, okay. Good, and we're getting ready for our ground war here. Move that over there. Oh no, no. There we go. That's what. Okay, single engine fighter prototype, great. And so we're now going to shift it up to here. So this is now looking to be doomed. Don't even know. Spanish Republic has transports to supply those units, and they're going there. Warhead infusing. Okay, yeah, propulsion, that's good. We'll switch that over to there. Yeah, Republican Spain's gonna lose. I don't think there's anything that's gonna kick in that's gonna let them win at this point. Not upset by that, but just would have been an interesting thing to see it go the other way. But it's also interesting that it's coming into 39, getting nearer to the historical end date. So my general philosophy of using a lot of heavy AA for Germany as an anti-tank thing doesn't really hold true nearly as much with playing as the Allies. It's still a useful anti-aircraft element, but torpedoes. Okay, we got that done. It doesn't, it isn't sort of a throw them in every division to overwhelm the enemy thing, so I'm not planning on doing it. At least, that's not my current plans. Things change, of course, but we'll see what we do. Now these guys are cut off. Light bomber, okay. Okay, well I guess this is a good time to end this episode. Thanks for watching. Thanks for liking the videos. Do appreciate that. And of course, post your comments. Love hearing from you. See you next time.